Okay, so welcome. In this tutorial, we are going to go over some other, I don't know if you'd call them more advanced drawing tools, but additional drawing tools that Illustrator has to offer. And these are tools that either just make it easier to make interesting shapes and break things apart or add things together, or it's like a whole new system for drawing objects that you've already made. And so the first thing we're going to be looking at is the ShapeBuilder tool. Then we will go into symbols and the symbol sprayer and what symbols are and why they're really useful to use and some of the ways you can work with them. And then we will probably finish up by talking about some of the other tools that are including the width tool, warp, pucker, bloat, crystallize, all of those things, which are all minus the width tool, they're all very similar to one another. And we'll look at some of the ways we can kind of make some custom things happen. So let's go ahead and get started. So to begin, let's go ahead and we're just going to draw 3 rectangles. Make sure they have some fill color. They could have the same fill or different fills. I'm actually going to select all of these and give them strokes, because that's an important part for when we're using the ShapeBuilder tool. And I'm going to make the stroke reasonably heavy. So I've got these 3 rectangles, and I'm going to position them so that they are, basically all 3 are overlapping each other, right? So it's not just 2 of them in a chain like that, but so we actually have 3 of these, and I'm intentionally not having one totally inside the shape of the other. And so the ShapeBuilder tool, what it does is it's similar to the Pathfinder, in that it allows you to join or merge or delete shapes based on how they intersect. And so what you need to do in order to use the ShapeBuilder tool, is first you have to select all the objects that you want to be considered as candidate objects for this ShapeBuilder tool. And then you select the ShapeBuilder tool, or you hit Shift and M. And once you've done that, you have an arrow with a plus sign, and as you hover over things, you get this gray little grid. Anywhere there's a chunk that is the intersection of 2 or 3 different shapes. Now, there's a couple ways this tool works. First, if you just click, what it does is it's going to create a new object that has the outlines as the boundaries of this shape. Now, one of the differences, last time we talked about Live Paint, one of the differences between the ShapeBuilder and Live Paint is Live Paint does not create any internal strokes where you have those intersections happening. Whereas the ShapeBuilder, the reason I put the stroke on here is because it creates additional strokes wherever on all 4 edges, or however many edges you end up having, of the shape that you've created. Right? So if I hold down if I click, it adds a new shape. If I hold down Option and click, it will subtract that shape. So it will get rid of that shape and leave the resulting shapes with fewer, with this hole in it. Then the other way that it works is if you click and drag. And if you click and drag, whatever objects you drag over will be joined together as one. So if I want to join these 3 things here together, I just click and drag, and you'll see now there's this red outline. And I let go, and now this is one big shape. So if I get out of the ShapeBuilder tool and go to my selection tool, this is a group at this point. And actually, no, it's not. I'm sorry. It's not a group, So I can pull this piece out. It's its own separate thing. And you'll see that I also have this piece, but you'll notice that because of the way this thing cut, it actually was hiding this other shape under here, Because just because of the way I cut this thing apart. So occasionally there's shapes, maybe you didn't necessarily need this one, but you wanted this shape and maybe one of these other shapes up here with the hole, set in the top. And so this one you could just delete. So that's the ShapeBuilder. So I would say experiment with this. It's just a really quick, handy way to do things. It doesn't introduce any really fundamentally new technique. It's just a quicker way to do things, So, I can always use, if I go and grab my pencil tool, and was to, create some, crazy shape here that I wanted to cut out. It's just a really quick way to hold down Shift M, come over here and first actually select these two shapes, hold down Shift M, come in here and say, yeah, I want this to be cut out from this other shape. So I can just hold down Option and deselect that. And then I have this, you know, oops. And then if I get out of this tool, right, now I just have this shape with this organic cutout on the inside of it, right? So this is it can be a really handy tool for very quickly making shapes from other objects that you've connected, right? If I wanted to say make, you know, kind of a pillowy, simple looking cloud or something like that, right? I could always come in here with the ellipse tool and, you know, just create, you know, a whole range of different shaped blobs. And, you know, depending on how I want this to look, I have no idea if this looks cloud-like at all. Probably not. I really need something that's a little flatter here at the bottom. If I want to make a simple cloud, and I probably don't even need this in the center, but let's go ahead and pop that up. And then, right, I should probably have a flat bottom here. So I'm going to go ahead and make a rectangle and try and make that fit nicely between these 2 points. And maybe I'll just adjust that a touch. And there's ways I could make sure that this was more well aligned, but I'm not going to worry about that too much right now. All right, but I've got all of those points, so now I just grab the ShapeBuilder tool. First, I select everything that I want to build together, and then I use Shift and M, and I can just click and drag, right, to connect all of these shapes. Now, note this might be a little bit crazy use for it because there's so many different pieces in there. Right, but I can do that, and then I get this one contiguous thing, and it looks like I missed a little bit down there at the bottom, but that's fine. Right, but now I have just this contiguous, flatly colored cloud that I made very, very quickly. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that, and delete this. Right, so that's the ShapeBuilder tool. It's not too challenging to use. So let's actually undo the last deletion. Hopefully you all have created a cloud as well. Please do so if you haven't. I'm going to delete this little lump off of here. And because this is now, you know, one uniform path, I may go ahead and just use my smooth tool because I have this kind of hard edge here. I'm just going to smooth that out just a touch. And over here, there's some weirdness going on too, so I might smooth that out. And it looks like I did miss something here. I'm not too worried about it though. Okay, so let's say that now I've made this cloud. I should probably recolor it to something more pleasant than vibrant green with a black outline. I'm going to go ahead and double click on this, and I'm going to make it maybe a grayish, but I kind of want it to be like more of a blue, a lightly blue gray color, and maybe even more blue. Granted, that's not accurate in any way to the real world, but it's going to stand up off of this. Oh, here's that other chunk that apparently I missed, so I'm just going to select that and get rid of it. There we go. So now let's say that, you know, I made this cloud because I really want to have a sky filled with various clouds of all, you know, shapes and sizes, so they kind of look like they go back into the distance or something like that. But I do want them to have this cartoony look. So I'm going to hold down Shift, and I'm going to just make this a little bit smaller to start with so that I can fit more up there. And then I am going to delete this other piece. Okay, so I've got this cloud, and so now I want to be able to make multiples of these. And I don't just want 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. I would love to have like 100 of these clouds all layered on top of one another up in the sky. And so to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this into a symbol. And a symbol is basically just a preset drawing that you can edit whenever you want to. And so I can change the color in here, and it's going to apply to any copies of that symbol that are drawn in my frame. And there's some really cool tools for drawing symbols as well. So to create a new symbol, all you do is you go to the Symbols panel, which if for whatever reason it's not available on the far right of your screen, you can just go to Window and go down to Symbols. And once I've done that, all I need to do is click and drag, and I can drag this into my symbols thing. I don't need to worry about any settings here, except I just need to call this cloud. And that is not how you spell cloud. There we go. So I'm just calling the symbol cloud, and now I have added it to my scene. So I have this one copy here. you'll notice that you get this little plus sign in the middle when it's a symbol. That's how you know what objects are symbols on your thing. And now that I've created that, there's this tool down here called the symbol sprayer. If I click and hold, you'll see there's lots of other symbol tools under there as well. We're going to start with the symbol sprayer, and I'm going to double click on it. Currently my diameter is 200 pixels, the intensity is set to 8, and my symbol density is set to 5, right? And there's actually all of these other tools, right, are here, and it, you know, it tells you how to get to these different things. I'm not going to be worried about, you know, any of these, but basically it says hold down the shift key to bring the symbol instances forward, blah, 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 blah. We'll talk about what those things do in a little bit. Now, all these other settings basically set how big these are, you know, how close they are together, spin, blah, blah, blah. We'll talk about all of that in a bit. But let's just go ahead and spray some stuff with these settings. And so if I just click and drag, right, it's spraying a whole bunch of clouds. And right now they are all the same size. Something else I want you to note is that they are all one object, right? So I've let off the mouse several times and sprayed some more, and I've gotten, right, it all stays as a singular clump of objects. So, but if I was to use a different symbol, like for some reason, if I wanted to use the print symbol, now, right, the reason I don't know why you would want a cloud of printers, but you know, you might. I usually, like, if you have a print icon spread throughout your entire document, and maybe it's many, many, many artboards worth of stuff, right? If you make a change to the symbol here, it will propagate across all of the different instances, which is, you know, we're not really worried about that right now. So I've sprayed a whole bunch of these. Now let's look at some of the other options that we've got. Now I have this set pretty dense, right? And I would say just test with these. Note you can use pressure from your stylus or whatever, but I would say just give some tests and see, you know, how setting this differently works. But let's go ahead and look at some of the other options. So below the symbol sprayer tool, we have the symbol shifter, the symbol scruncher, the symbol sizer, spinner, stainer, screener, and styler. Apparently they liked alliteration when they were making this. So what does the symbol shifters tool do? So the symbol shifter, oh, first, right, it's giving me an error because I don't have this selected right now. So I have to select it. Then I can do the shifter. So what does the shifter do? The shifter allows me to pull these elements around, and it does it in a way where, you know, anything that's, it's sort of like there's a fall off, right? So it'll move it the most if I'm really close to the center of the object. But if there's neighboring objects that are kind of close, they'll move a little bit, right? And so you can kind of see I have some freedom to like reposition these objects. You know, if I was like, oh, I really want these to have kind of a more even bottom, and maybe I don't really want there to be too many holes, right, in this cloud cover. Or maybe I want more holes, right? So that's one option. That's one tool, is just to be able to move them around a little bit as a group. One of the other options is a symbol scruncher tool, and this draws nearby symbols closer together. And so if you can see, if I pull this down, it just scrunches them together a little bit, right? And so again, it's something where it just depends on where I have these things set. Now, some of these settings we may not notice right away, but I want to show you. So the other one is the symbol sizer. So, also with the symbol shifter, if I hold down Option, right, it doesn't really do anything else. If I hold down Shift, it allows me to select a subgroup to move. Oh, sorry, it allows me to rearrange the order, right? So I can bring whatever's here to the top, right? So if I'm like, oh, I really want, you know, some of these lower ones to be on top of the ones that are behind them, I can go ahead and manually adjust where these symbols are in the hierarchy among the other symbols, right? So I can shift this one down a little bit more if I wanted to, but you get the idea, right? So I can rearrange the order. If I go to my symbol scruncher tool, if I hold down Option while I'm scrunching, I can, you may have seen that happen really quickly, right? But I can basically push these other, I can do the opposite of scrunching, right? I can push them further apart. right? And it's something that does happen over time. Sometimes it goes a little bit faster. If I go down to the next option, that's the Symbol Sizer tool. And if I just click without holding any buttons down, right, I can make and click and drag a little bit or just hover over an object. I can sometimes infuriatingly quickly scale these things up or up. If I hold down Option and click, I can scale them back down. Right, so here I can create this like really, pretty intense set of clouds where some are significantly smaller than others, some are larger than others. Yeah, and so I'm going to shrink that one down too. Right, so you can, and then you just say, you go back and you're like, oh, I really want to bring this this one up in the hierarchy, so I'm going to hold down Shift and click. Oops, I actually wanted to bring that guy up front. There we go. And so, right, so I can do those. So let's look at some of the other options. We're just going to keep going. Symbol Spinner. In this case, I wouldn't necessarily want to spin these, but you can see that I can go through and actually rotate these shapes. And if I, depending on which direction I aim this, right, I can either rotate them, to the right or to the left. And so that's another really great option, especially if you've made a bunch of copies of something and you want them to say, gently follow a curve or something like that, you can do that. In my case, I didn't really want to rotate them, but whatever. I've rotated the clouds now. So I'm going to go ahead, and then we have a couple other options here. We have the Symbol Stainer, the Symbol Screener, and the Symbol Styler. So these three affect the appearance of the object. So the Symbol Stainer, right now, I currently have no fill selected. If I double click and choose a color, and I'm going to choose this green for whatever reason. If I click and drag, it's going to basically blend whatever color I have chosen with the underlying color. And it really depends on, right, on how close it is to the main object that I've selected. And so I'm going to undo those that last step. I believe you can also set the stroke color. So, right, it's black here. Let's make it, I don't know, something that's going to be obvious. Magenta. Right, and so if I click this, no, it looks like it's just doing fill color. Clearly I don't use all of these settings that much, but you can imagine, right, that this allows me to, I'm already getting, significantly more depth by having some of these be green and some of these be blue. And you can imagine, I'm sure you can all imagine ways to apply this to things that you're working on. So that's the Stainer. So the other thing I can do is the Screener tool allows me to create a variable opacity for these different clones. So if I click on this, right, you can see that now as I'm going through, these are becoming more or less opaque. If I hold down Option, I can make, and click again, right, I can make them more opaque. And the longer I hold, the more, or the closer I am to the center of the object, the more opaque or transparent it becomes. If I click over here and drag a little bit, or maybe just, so if I move really quickly across the surface, it seems to be the best bet, right? So you can see that, I can come in here and I can make these of varying intensities. It's a really nice, quick way to work with a large number of objects. So let's go ahead and look at some other things we can do with symbols. So we've got our symbols set, but let's say, oh, I don't want it to be that pale blue, or I want the stroke to be a different color. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to select this, I'm going to double click, and you'll notice that, right, I can't select one of these individual objects, right? I can only select the entire set. And so what I need to do is I need to go to Symbols, and I want to double click on my cloud. Now, when I do that, you'll see that I get this single little cloud, and I'm kind of in an isolation mode. And if I select this cloud, now a symbol doesn't have to be a single object, right? It can be, as you can see with the heart with the plus sign here on it, it can be several different elements all put together, right? There's no reason for this to be a single element. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and make a couple changes to this. So let's say I actually want this to be, I don't know, maybe it's a beautiful sunset and I want this to be like a more of a purple color. And for the stroke, let's just go ahead and make that orange, because why not? Let's make it ugly. Sure, we'll just do that beautiful orange color. So now I've got this, I've made these changes to the cloud. I could also, maybe I decide that I want, one of these strokes to be more, to have the curvature adjusted some, so I can go ahead and select my element, use the curvature tool, and just, tweak this somewhat. I'm not quite sure where the other point is, right? So now this doesn't look anything at all like a cloud. There we go. That's the corner I was looking for. Right, so, maybe I wanted it to be a little more lumpy like that. And then if I click out here, then what it's going to do is it's going to automatically go through and update all the clouds to be the same as the one that I had set previously. And so I could add a bunch more artwork to it. I could do all sorts of different things to that. Right, so these are symbols, and this is the symbol sprayer. There's lots of uses. I've used them for things as mundane as creating labels for bottles of a product, where I could go into the symbol, like I had a whole sheet that was going to print like 8 or 10 labels. I could just go in, edit one, all the changes replicate. It's really a super efficient way to do something like that. But it's also great for making artwork where you need, a whole bunch of objects or things as part of a background, or, maybe you're making grass or hair or fur or something like that. There's just, there's a range of things that you can do with it. Okay, so we've got this beautiful cloudy background. I'm going to pull this up a little bit. And I want you to note, something else. Let's go ahead and actually grab the sprayer tool again and make sure we still have the same symbol selected. I do want you to note that when I go and spray new copies, I guess never mind. Earlier, I don't know if I had some option set, but it was actually applying the same transparency. But that's not the case here, so I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of those. Maybe I'll go ahead and run a few more there at the bottom. I don't know. Okay, so anyway, that failed. Let's go ahead and go on to our next thing that we need to talk about. So we've talked about the ShapeBuilder, and we've talked about the symbol spray, right? These are two ways to make some interesting things happen. So there's a couple tools that we still need to talk about, right? We've talked about Live Paint, but we really need to talk about what all of these tools do. So let's start by creating an object, and I'm going to start with an ellipse, and I'm just going to make it reasonably large so that we can see what's going on. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit as well. And so we're not going to worry so much about the width tool yet. We'll look at that in just a second. But what we're going to do is we're going to be looking at some of these other tools. Now, all of these do slightly different things. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the Wrinkle Tool to start with, right? It's the very last option. If I double click on it or hit enter, right, on the keyboard, I get all of these options. Now, there's a bunch of things going on here. First, there's the size of my brush in width and height. There's the angle, there's the intensity. I can check mark whether I want to use pen pressure or not. And then there's the wrinkle options. And so the wrinkle options say, should it be wrinkled in the horizontal direction or the vertical direction or both? And how much complexity should it have, how much detail, etc. I'm going to leave this set to the default and show you what happens. So all you do is you click and drag, and what it does is it just goes through and literally wrinkles the path that you just created, right? So this can be a really nice way to create, finer detail on things. And I want you to note that right now, if I double click on this again, you'll see currently it's not wrinkling horizontally, it's just wrinkling vertically, right? So I'm getting wrinkles in this direction, but I'm not getting wrinkles in this direction. If I was to flip that or around, we can see the opposite. So if I say 100 and then 0, and I hit OK, right? Now it's wrinkling side to side, but as I get closer to the bottom, I get fewer wrinkles because, right, right, it's doing this. And if I go back over something, right, it's just going to keep wrinkling it deeper and deeper, and it's going to wrinkle the wrinkles, right? And so I get more and more intense wrinkles. I'm going to undo a couple of those steps. I'm going to double click on this again, or just hit enter, honestly. And so now, right, if I can adjust these to make it wrinkle in both directions if I want to. I can reduce the pressure. So if I make this like just 10%, and maybe I make my width and height like 300 pixels by 300 pixels. And I leave the angle set to 0 and I hit OK. And I'm actually, before I'm going to grab and just make another shape, and let's change the color a little bit so it's obvious. And then I'm just going to go back to the Wrinkle Tool, right? And so now you can see it's like much less of an impact. And so it gives me a way to, one, there's a lot more space between these wrinkle points because I have a bigger brush. And two, I reduce the intensity a lot. So if you're trying to add a little bit, like you've created a, you know, a pretty uniform shape using this, or maybe you have like just a really clean, you know, you use the pencil tool and you drew some freeform shape, but it's really, really clean and you want to make it a little bit more irregular, right? You can just click and drag on that and you'll get these irregular lines, right? It ends up, you know, a lot of times mimicking kind of like a shaky hand-drawn object. And again, these settings just allow you to really change the way things look. And you can experiment with complexity, experiment with detail, and some of the other options as well. You'll find many tutorials out there that give you very specific settings for how to create a specific effect using the Wrinkle Tool. I'm not going to go there with this. We're just going to look at some of the high-level stuff. So let's look at some of the other options under there. All the rest of these work similarly. The tools are all, you know, related to one another. If I go to Crystallize and just use the default settings, you'll see that, right, it's either if the brush is on the inside of the shape, it's crystallizing in, and if the brush center is on the outside, it crystallizes out, or sorry, into the shape, right? So this is, and note that I don't have these shapes selected. It's basically every shape that my brush touches is going to be impacted. This can be good and bad. So just be aware of that. And also note, if you go too crazy, your strokes will overlap and things might get a little bit weird. So just keep that in mind, right? So if I double click on Crystallize, you'll see I have the same options up top and those have stayed the same. This is with only 10% intensity. And then I have similar options below, right? So these settings stay across different options. So bloat, right? Bloat does what you would expect, right? If I want this lump to be a little bit bigger, right, I can bloat it out using this bloat tool. If I want it to be like the inverse of that to happen, I can just click outside of the shape. I can also hold down Option. Option actually reshapes the brush. But yeah, so that's bloat. Surprisingly enough, pucker, right, does, if I am floating over the object, it's going to pull these points closer to the center. If I'm further out, it's going to pull them closer to wherever the tip of the brush is. All right, so again, these are tools that can allow you to reshape things. They can be really useful, but typically you want to make sure they're dialed way back. And the Scallop tool is kind of like Crystallize, right? It creates scalloped edges, you know, and so you can experiment with the other options, but they're all basically the same. Twirl's a little bit weird, right? It spins that geometry around. Again, it goes really quickly, and it's all based on where you have your thing. But you can see that you can, you know, create, you know, some interesting looks and things that don't typically look like they've been made in Illustrator using these tools in combination. What else do we need to cover? Warp. Warp basically just allows you to click and drag to pull or push the path a little bit, right? And that can be, again, that can be really useful if you're, if you need to gently modify something, if it's not quite the right proportions that you were hoping for. And granted, I'm using this with a pretty low setting. So if I do, if I was to bring this back up to 50% and hit OK, right, I'm going to be able to have much more dramatic effects on this as I pull this around. Right. So again, these are all things that tools that you can use to really warp and distort the paths that you've created. Right. These were at one point ellipses, right? But they are no longer anywhere near that shape, right? It's a little bit more like working with I don't know, two-dimensional clay or something on your artboard. Okay. So we've done all those tools. So then what's the width tool and why is it lumped together with these? I think they lump it together because it's about warping things, but it's about warping the path. So we have a lot going on in this image. So I'm just going to quickly create a new file that has nothing in it. And again, I'm going to use the ellipse tool. I'm going to create an ellipse. I'm going to set the fill color to something not terribly unpleasant, maybe this purple. Actually, it's going to be hard to see. Something not super unpleasant, but also easy to see the stroke off of. I'm going to set the stroke width to something really large. Not insanely large, but we'll just say 15 pixels. So what the width tool allows me to do is it allows me to change the width profile of the stroke, right? So up top, right, we have all these different width profiles. So I'm going to go ahead and select this and hide this, right, that are available here. It's grayed out currently, and this is grayed out for some reason. And so first question is, why is this grayed out? And then and not able to be used. And so let's go ahead and figure out what's going on. So the first thing I noticed is that this stroke is on the inside of my path. And so that is most likely what is causing problems. If I align this on the center, you'll note that automatically this changes. And now when I hover over this, I get a plus sign instead of a no symbol. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in a bit more so we can see what's happening. And so what this does is it allows me to hover any point over here on the path and click to create essentially almost like an anchor point. And then I can pull out and expand the path, right? So now if you see the whole thing, right, this is the default thickness and it's slowly getting thicker here. If I go over a little bit further and I draw this in, right, I can change this. If I zoom in enough so that I can get on top of this point, I can actually drag this along the path so I can have a more sharp change. And I can create as many thickness points or thinness points as I want. I can go really, really small with it, right? All of this allows you to go through on any path you've taken, and especially if you haven't been using, if you've wanted to have more organic looking strokes on your objects, this is a way that you can start to do that. And now you'll also note that it's created this width profile up here. And if I go ahead and you'll see I have a bunch of these, but I have this current one selected. If I click on this add to profiles option, I can call this Blobby McBlobberson and hit OK. Right, and so now this is one of these paths. Now these I created in a separate file a while ago. The width profiles stay with Illustrator. So any width profiles you add, they're available to you in any file. So if I go back to this file that says recovered, and if I go and select this and come down here and scroll down, I can click on Blobby McBlobberson, which I don't really see any difference yet, but if I bump this up to like 9 pixels, you'll see that I'm getting this profile. And granted, this is a really long path. So most of the thickness is happening here, but you can kind of see how it's applied elsewhere. Now, if I go to my symbols and click on my cloud and select my cloud and come down here and choose this, I should see a much more noticeable thing. Let's go ahead and make this black again, so it's a little bit easier to see. And I pop back out of here, and now you'll see that all of those clouds have that variable profile that I just created using the width tool. Right? That's a really powerful way to go through and customize any strokes that you have, because sometimes you want something to be tapered or whatever, but you don't want it to start necessarily where Illustrator decides that it starts. And so what you can do is you can start with your uniform profile, and then you can go in and you can use the width tool to modify that. Okay. Okay, there's one last tool I want to show you that's one of my least favorite tools in the world. And it's the Shaper tool. The Shaper tool, its sole purpose is to interpret your scribbles as standard shapes. So if I just click and draw something close to a circle, it will actually create a circle. If I then create another circle, right, it'll create an additional circle there, right? These are two just separate shapes. If I, do something that somewhat closely resembles a rectangle, nothing happens. Let me try this again. If I do something that somewhat closely resembles a rectangle, right, it gives me a rectangle. If I still have that selected and I, create a circle up here, right, it's going to create a circle that intersects it. But if I draw out here somewhere, I'm not getting anything. It needs to be right on top of that same kind of drawing. And you'll see that these other paths are also highlighting and allow me to draw these shapes on top of them. If I create something like a rough triangle, it'll give me an exact triangle. If I attempt to draw a pentagon, which I'm just going to fail at, it's probably going to give me, didn't give me anything. I was going to say it's probably going to give me a circle. I mean, that was apparently a square. So, I've never had a need of this tool, ever. I'd much rather use the actual tools to draw it, but maybe if I was using a tablet, like a iPad or something like that, maybe that would be an efficient way to work. But, it just never has done anything interesting for me. Okay, and with that, we will end this tutorial, right? So those are some more advanced drawing tools that hopefully give you some more freedom and to explore and work with some other features that Illustrator has to offer.